I knew something was off the moment I saw her pacing on my front lawn, hands on her hips like she ran the whole block. Her name was Beverly 50-something, bleach blonde bob, oversized sunglasses, and the permanent scowl of someone who thought they were the queen of the HOA. I was walking my dog Milo, a golden retriever with more manners than half the neighborhood. He wore his red service vest, just like always. Milo's not just a pet, he's a trained PTSD service dog for my dad, who served 2 tours before retiring. We lived together, me and my old man, in a modest place in the Willow Heights community. And ever since he moved in with me 3 months ago, Beverly's been circling like a vulture. "Excuse me," she snapped, marching toward me like a mall cop on a power trip. "That dog is not authorized to be off-leash on HOA property." I paused, confused. Milo was not only on a leash, but his vest clearly marked him as a service animal. "He's a service dog," I said calmly. "We have every right to be here." "Well, I haven't seen any proof of that," she said, crossing her arms. "And I looked through your file, no documentation submitted to the HOA board." "My file?" I raised an eyebrow. "You went through my file," she ignored that. "That vest is fake." "I've reported people like you before." Before I could even react, she lunged forward and yanked the vest clean off Milo. "Hey," I shouted, stepping between her and my dog. "What the hell is wrong with you? I'm confiscating this," she said, holding the vest like it was contraband. "Until you prove it's real, HOA policy." "You're out of your mind," I growled. She turned and strutted off with the vest in hand like she'd just done the neighborhood a favor. Milo pressed against my leg, confused and anxious. I was furious, but I didn't chase after her. Because my dad, Xavier Whitlow, had just stepped onto the porch, and I'd never seen him look so quietly angry. He didn't yell. He didn't even say anything at first. He just looked at me, looked at Milo without his vest, and then down the street where Beverly disappeared around the corner. Then he said, "Get the camera footage. She just committed a felony." I blinked. "What?" "She stole federal service dog equipment," he said, already pulling out his phone. "That's a crime, and I'm pressing charges." And just like that, Beverly had no idea what she'd just gotten herself into. Xavier didn't waste a second. He stepped inside and called Officer Ramirez directly. They'd served together overseas, and Ramirez now worked patrol in our city. I stood at the kitchen counter, watching my dad's posture rigid, focused. His voice never rose, but every word was deliberate, like he was reciting coordinates for an airstrike. "I've got a name and full video of the theft," he said. "She removed ADA equipment from a trained service dog. I want to press charges formally." Pause. "Yes." "Right now." While he spoke, I pulled the footage from our doorbell cam. It caught everything: Beverly's approach, her grabbing Milo's vest, and her marching off with it. Clear audio, too. You could hear her admitting she was taking it. I emailed it to my dad's account before he even asked. By the time Ramirez arrived 15 minutes later, Beverly was still nowhere in sight. But her beige golf cart was parked in front of the HOA clubhouse, 2 blocks down. Ramirez stepped out of his cruiser, nodded at me, and shook my dad's hand firmly. "She make a habit of targeting your family?" Ramirez asked. "She's been circling since I moved in," I said. "But this crossed a line." Ramirez reviewed the footage on his tablet, eyebrows lifting slightly. "This'll hold up. That vest is federally protected under ADA Title Roman III. Interfering with a service animal's gear is treated the same way as interfering with the animal itself." "So we're pressing charges?" I asked. "That's up to the DA," Ramirez replied. "But we're filing a report, and I'll personally deliver the footage to the precinct tonight." "She won't walk away from this." He turned toward the clubhouse. "Let's go have a conversation." But before he could even knock, the door flew open. Beverly stood there with the vest in one hand and a clipboard in the other, her face twisted into a wide, exaggerated smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Officer, how can I help you?" she asked, as though we were the ones trespassing. "You can start by handing over stolen property," Ramirez said flatly. She held up the vest like it was a prize from a raffle. "This? Oh, I was just securing it pending confirmation." "We have policy procedures about unauthorized animals." "You're not a law enforcement officer," Ramirez interrupted. "You don't get to seize federally protected items. This is theft." Her smile faltered. "Now hold on. That's a serious accusation. I'm not accusing, I'm stating." We have video of you taking the vest. And you said clearly that you were confiscating it. That's not your jurisdiction. You committed a criminal offense." Beverly's expression shifted again, now to something closer to panic, but her tone stayed syrupy. "Well, if there's been a misunderstanding, I'm more than happy to return it." She extended the vest toward Ramirez, but he didn't take it. "You'll hand it to the rightful owner," he said, gesturing to me. I stepped forward and took it without a word. Milo, sitting beside me, wagged his tail once, like he understood this was some kind of victory. Ramirez glanced back toward Beverly. "You'll be hearing from the district attorney's office. I'm filing the report today. I suggest you review HOA law in the meantime." But instead of backing down, Beverly's lips curled. "I'll have you know the HOA has its own attorney," she snapped. "And we're reviewing your property for compliance violations. That shed out back." I don't recall a permit being filed, and there it was, the shift. She wasn't apologizing, she was retaliating. Ramirez didn't flinch. "Now you're threatening retaliation for reporting a crime. That's harassment. You really want to keep escalating," she didn't answer. Just turned and slammed the door. Back at the house, my dad sat at the dining table, laptop open, typing faster than I'd ever seen. He was pulling up the HOA bylaws, zoning permits, and ADA statutes. "You know," I said, handing Milo a treat, "I think she just declared war." "She doesn't know what kind of war she started," he muttered, eyes still on the screen. "She thinks this is about a dog vest. It's about every power grab she's pulled in this neighborhood." I sat across from him. "You think she's done this to other people? I'd stake my pension on it," he said. "We're not just going after her for theft. We're going to dig through every decision she's made as HOA president, every fine, every violation, every denied request." That night, we created a spreadsheet titled Willow Heights Corruption. By morning, it had 14 entries. Neighbors started knocking on our door. The first was a quiet older man named Mr. Kwon, who said Beverly fined him for repainting his fence, even though the color matched the original. He'd paid it just to avoid trouble, but he still had the notice. Then came the Andersons, a young couple with a baby. Beverly had accused them of improper trash bin placement and charged them $200. They'd appealed, but the HOA board which she chaired denied it without a hearing. By noon, we had 23 cases. My dad printed out everyone, organized them by date, and began cross-referencing them with HOA meeting minutes we requested under the Community Transparency Clause. As it turned out, Beverly had been approving her own rule changes, sometimes without quorum and often without notifying residents. That's when my dad picked up the phone and called his old friend, Janice Temple, a municipal attorney who now worked for the city's Community Oversight Board. He didn't even have to explain everything. He just said, "We may have an abuse of authority situation in Willow Heights, and I've got documentation." Janice showed up at our house the next day with a legal pad, a coffee thermos, and a look of grim satisfaction. "I've been waiting for one of these HOA tyrants to overstep badly enough," she said. "Let's tear this thing open." Over the next week, we compiled a formal complaint to the city, not just about the theft, but about financial mismanagement, unauthorized fines, and procedural violations. Janice helped us word it so every accusation was backed with clear documentation. But the real knockout punch came when we found Beverly had issued over $15,000 in fines over the past 18 months. And deposited those checks into a private HOA account that no other board members had access to. Only her name was on the account. Janice's eyes lit up. "That's misappropriation of funds, possibly wire fraud. We're not just looking at civil penalties anymore. We're talking felony charges." We submitted everything to the city's legal department and the state HOA compliance board. A week later, Beverly was served a subpoena. 2 days after that, the rest of the HOA board who had always voted with her resigned in a panic. Milo got his vest back. But that wasn't the real victory. The real win was watching Beverly's empire start to crumble, and we were just getting started. The morning after Beverly was served, Xavier was already on the phone with a forensic accountant named Darius Gillam, someone he'd worked with during a contractor fraud case years ago. Darius specialized in tracing misappropriated community funds and had a reputation for exposing embezzlers with surgical precision. When my dad explained the situation, Darius said only one thing: "Send me the bank statements and HOA meeting records. I'll find the cracks." By noon, Darius had uncovered the first one: a withdrawal of over $3,000 labeled Community Beautification Expense had no accompanying receipt or contractor invoice. Two other withdrawals, each over $4,000, were marked Legal Consulting Retainer, but the HOA had no registered legal advisor on file with the city, and no board minutes mentioned a vote approving any such expense. Darius sent over a detailed report. It wasn't just sloppy bookkeeping, it was deliberate concealment. The withdrawals lined up with known dates when Beverly had hosted private events at a country club outside city limits. "She's laundering fine money through fake line items," Darius told my dad. "And if even $1 of that came from homeowners, it's wire fraud and misuse of fiduciary duty. I've already marked 6 federal violations." Xavier forwarded the report to Janice, who immediately escalated the complaint to the district attorney's white-collar crime division. She also filed a motion with the city to freeze the HOA's accounts pending a forensic audit. Within 48 hours, the funds were locked down. I was standing in our front yard watering the hawthorn bushes when I noticed a white sedan creeping slowly up our street. It stopped in front of the clubhouse, and 2 stern-faced individuals stepped out, one in a gray suit, the other in a navy windbreaker with the letters CID, Municipal Fraud Unit, on the back. A third person, carrying a large briefcase, joined them from a second vehicle. I turned the water off and walked over. "Excuse me," I said. "You guys with the city?" The man in the windbreaker nodded. "Fraud Division. We're here to conduct a records seizure. HOA's under formal investigation." The clubhouse door was locked, but that didn't slow them down. They produced a key copied from the HOA's file with city records and stepped in. 20 minutes later, they emerged with 3 computer towers, 2 filing boxes, and a stack of handwritten notes bound with rubber bands. That afternoon, a notice was posted at the clubhouse entrance: "HOA operations suspended pending legal review." The entire neighborhood buzzed like a kicked wasp nest. People who'd never spoken to one another were suddenly holding court in driveways, sharing stories of fines they'd paid, fence approvals that were inexplicably denied, and mysterious charges labeled administrative reassessment that no one could explain. At sunset, a man named Arlo from 2 streets over knocked on our door. He was in his mid-60s, wore a dusty mechanic's shirt, and carried a weathered manila folder. "I've been waiting for someone to stand up to her," he said, eyes scanning the sidewalk behind him. "She fined me $700 last year for a carport she said didn't match the aesthetic. I built that carport in '92, before the HOA even existed." He handed the folder to my dad. Inside were photos, permits, and a notarized statement from a city inspector dated 3 decades ago. "She's been rewriting history," my dad said, "and no one's challenged her because she made the process so difficult people just gave up." Arlo nodded. "She's got a whole file cabinet in there full of fake notices. I saw her shred a stack of appeal letters last spring." That blew the lid off the already boiling pot. Over the next 3 days, more residents came forward. One woman had been denied disability accommodations for her ramp installation. A single mother had her gate lock picked open by a maintenance worker Beverly had authorized without ever informing her. A retired firefighter had been threatened with lien paperwork over a satellite dish that had been grandfathered in per county guidelines. Beverly, meanwhile, had gone completely silent. Her golf cart vanished from the street. Her porch lights stayed off at night, but the damage was already public. Local news picked up the story on the 4th day. A reporter stood in front of the clubhouse as footage of the CID team carting out boxes played in the corner of the screen. The headline read, "HOA President under investigation for theft, fraud, and civil rights violations." They even aired the doorbell footage of her stealing Milo's vest, blurring out our address but making her face unmistakable. That evening, the city council held an emergency meeting. Janice was invited to speak, and she didn't hold back. Beverly Langley abused her position to enrich herself, suppress homeowner rights, and retaliate against residents who questioned her authority, she said. Her actions are not only illegal, they undermine the very foundation of community governance. The council voted unanimously to dissolve the current HOA board and appoint a temporary oversight committee made up of 5 homeowners selected through a transparent lottery system. One of them was my dad. He didn't celebrate, he just got to work. He set up a folding table outside the clubhouse the next morning with a stack of blank forms, a laptop, and a sign that read, HOA Reform Forum, bring your story. By noon, there was a line 20 people deep. While he handled intake, I walked Milo down to the community garden where Beverly used to host her exclusive wine tastings. It was empty now, the wrought iron gate hanging open, weeds poking through the gravel. I picked up a discarded cork near a bench and tossed it in the trash. Milo sat by my feet, tail brushing the ground. You helped crack this open, buddy, I said. She didn't count on anyone fighting back. Later that week, the district attorney's office held a press conference. The lead prosecutor announced that formal charges had been filed: felony theft of protected service equipment, embezzlement, misuse of public trust, and falsification of HOA documentation. They had bank records, video evidence, and over 30 sworn testimonies. Beverly was arrested at her sister's house 2 towns over. She tried to claim she was being politically targeted, but the officers didn't even let her finish the sentence before placing her in cuffs. The best part: the HOA's insurance policy covered legal mismanagement, meaning all the fines she'd illegally collected were refunded. Every last dollar. Xavier used his position on the interim committee to propose a new set of bylaws with strict transparency mandates, rotating leadership, and a mandatory third-party audit every 2 years. The vote passed with over 90% approval. At the first town hall following the reforms, a young boy named Jonah stood up during open comments. His mom had been fined for painting their door blue. He looked around the room and said, "I like how it looks now, and my mom doesn't cry anymore." No one spoke for a moment after that. Then the room erupted in applause. Xavier quietly stepped down from the oversight board a month later. He said his job was done. I asked him if he missed it. "No," he said. "I just wanted people to stop being afraid of their own front yards." Milo got a new vest in the mail the following week. This one had a patch sewn on the side that read, "Willow Heights Hero." He wears it on every walk. The new bylaws passed, the funds restored, and the former regime removed, but there was still one final thread to unravel. Something deeper than fines or stolen service vests. Something that had been hiding in plain sight all along. It started when Daphne from the city records office called Janice on a Friday morning. She wasn't part of the investigation team, just a mid-level clerk who'd been asked to cross-reference architectural permits for a few of the residents still disputing previous violations. She'd found something odd in the HOA's original charter. The Willow Heights HOA was never formally registered with the county, she said. The articles of incorporation were drafted, but the final version was never filed with the Department of Community Affairs. That stopped everything. Without formal incorporation, none of the HOA's enforcement actions held legal weight. Not the fines, not the liens, not the restrictions, and certainly not the board's authority over residents' properties. Janice verified the finding herself, combing through digital archives and physical microfiche records. The name Willow Heights HOA appeared on a draft, but every final document had been returned for resubmission. The final approval line, completely blank. Xavier sat across from her in a quiet booth at the municipal library, scanning the pages. "So this entire time," he said slowly, "they've been operating illegally." Janice leaned back, tapping her pen against the edge of the folder. "Operating as if they were legitimate. Which makes every enforcement action fraudulent under state law, and Beverly filed taxes under that name." Xavier didn't say anything. He just opened his laptop and began typing again, this time starting a new document labeled Criminal Fraud Timeline. The next day, A formal complaint was filed with the state's Attorney General's office. While the local DA had been prosecuting Beverly for the misuse of funds and theft, the AG had broader jurisdiction and the power to launch a full audit of every action the pseudo-HOA had taken over the past decade. It was no longer just about abuse of power. It was about an unregistered organization impersonating an enforcement body and collecting funds under false pretenses. The audit team arrived quietly. No flashing lights, no press. Just 3 state investigators with briefcases and ID cards who walked into the city records department and requested digital access to the HOA's history. They didn't speak to anyone else for a week, but residents noticed them canvassing the neighborhood, knocking on doors, asking for copies of fines, letters, and any documents signed by Beverly or her previous board. Then one morning, a notice was posted on every mailbox in the neighborhood. Residents of Willow Heights, a state-level investigation has confirmed that the previous HOA lacked legal authority to enforce residential compliance. All past fees, restrictions, and liens filed under the unregistered board are nullified. You are entitled to full refunds and the right to seek civil damages. The neighborhood erupted, not with chaos but with disbelief. Arlo stood on his porch holding the letter, his hands trembling slightly. She built a fake government, he said, more to himself than anyone else. She pretended she had power, and we believed it. Xavier didn't celebrate. He just called Ramirez again. There's one more thing, he said into the phone. I think you're going to want to see the clubhouse storage unit. The clubhouse, now locked and abandoned, had a small storage facility out back. When the city had seized records earlier, they hadn't accessed the shed, no one had the key, and it wasn't listed on any official documents. But Xavier had noticed something strange weeks earlier. The lock on the unit was brand new, and the concrete around the base had recently been scrubbed clean. Ramirez arrived with a warrant. The locksmith popped the latch in under a minute. Inside were 8 large plastic bins, each filled with shredded paper. Another held 10 years' worth of HOA checks, many written by residents who had since passed away. Beneath the bins, stacked in a water-damaged cardboard box, were dozens of returned appeal letters, crumpled and unopened. But the worst was in the final bin. 4 detailed spreadsheets, clearly printed from Excel, with names, addresses, and payment histories. Next to each entry was a column labeled Compliance Leverage. Underneath, notes like Elderly Won't Fight, Single Mom Press Harder, and Military Watch Closely. Ramirez looked at Xavier, then at the open bin. This isn't just fraud, he said. This is systemic targeting. They filed a supplemental report with the AG's office, attaching photographs and the contents of the spreadsheets. A new charge was added to Beverly's case, conspiracy to commit civil rights violations. She'd been out on bail, waiting for her hearing. She didn't show up to the next one. U.S. Marshals picked her up 48 hours later in a short-term rental 2 counties away. She dyed her hair and was using a fake name. Her new charges included attempted flight to avoid prosecution. The trial began 6 weeks later. Xavier testified first. He wasn't emotional. He didn't rant. He simply described what happened when Beverly yanked the vest off Milo and walked away, and what unfolded after. The judge listened without interrupting once. Then came Janice, Darius, Ramirez, and finally a row of residents who had been fined, harassed, and intimidated. The pressure had built for years. Now it all came out under oath. The jury returned a verdict in less than 3 hours, guilty, every count. Beverly was sentenced to 12 years in prison for fraud, wire crimes, and civil rights violations. The judge also ordered restitution for every affected resident, totaling over $800,000. The state dissolved the fraudulent HOA entity permanently and passed a new law the following year requiring all homeowner associations to register within a statewide database, subject to random audits and public transparency mandates. As for Willow Heights, things changed fast. The interim committee transitioned into a voluntary neighborhood council, not an enforcement body, just a group of residents who hosted monthly meetings and managed common areas. Membership was open, leadership rotated, and every decision was voted on in public. The clubhouse, once a symbol of Beverly's control, was converted into a community center. The locked storage unit was torn down and replaced with a garden pavilion. Arlo donated his old tools for a shared workshop. The Andersons hosted the first neighborhood barbecue in years, and over 70 people showed up. No fines, no threats, just food, music, and the sound of kids laughing near the swings. Xavier sat on a bench near the garden, watching Milo nap in the shade. He didn't speak much anymore about what had happened, but every now and then, when someone thanked him for what he'd done, he'd simply nod and say, "I just made sure the right story got told." And it had, because in the end, it wasn't about the vest. It was about someone who thought they could control a community through fear and learning, in the hardest way possible, that fear only works until the first person stands up. After that, it crumbles, just like Beverly's paper empire, piece by piece.